Well, thank you, Tracy and Steve, and I agree with you. Local is where it's at. That's where it's at, guys. Well, I ran for the Austin City Council back in 2014. And when we had electronic voting in Travis County. We had paper ballots for ballot by mail, and we had electronic for about 4,000 votes. And I'll tell you what, I ran for city council in Austin. Everybody knows Austin wastes a lot of money. Okay, you just showed something, Austin's off the charts. And we had just gone to a 10-member district system for our city council. We used to be in that large system for about 40 years. So I decided to run for city council when the first round of 10 districts were formed in Travis County for Austin. And you know what? The voters in Austin are sick and tired of the taxes. They are out of this world. We are being priced out constantly. And I'll tell you what, guys, I grew up poor in Mansfield, Texas. My dad was a cattle auctioneer at the stockyards, and we had a dairy. And I grew up on a farm. And I'll tell you what, farm kids, we're taught to tell the truth, are we not? Okay, we are. Because I tell you, the rural community, your word is your bond. So I was raised in the cattle community with my mom and dad, and I was taught to tell the truth. So when I ran for the city council, that was my deal. I'm going to tell the truth. We want transparency with Austin, and we want to reduce those subsidies that Austin gives to all these corporations. I'll tell you one thing. Austin gave $9 million to Apple when they were already doing business in Austin. What in the world does Apple Computers, who has $300 billion in the bank, need with Austin's $9 million? And that came out of my pocket, okay? So that was the campaign that we waged in Austin in this little district. And my district was in the northeast part of Austin, in the Runberg area. I don't know if anybody knows what that area is, but it is a lot of crime, a lot of prostitution, a lot of drug crime, and a lot of gangs. And so I was running to reduce our taxes. And so what happened was, you know, and municipal races are all nonpartisan, okay? But I'm conservative, I have been. And the Democrats moved in a little 24-year-old candidate into my district 2 weeks before the deadline that they could move somebody in there. 24 years old, okay? Now I lived in Austin 30 years, raised my daughter there, I've been on many boards. We saved $4 million in 20 minutes at City Hall this summer before, okay? Because we spoke out against the subsidy. And the people don't want these things. We don't need to subsidize the businesses in Austin. You see the Austin skyline? We are paying for it. It's taxpayers, okay? So they moved in this little 24-year-old because the status quo couldn't have, you know, the gravy train cut off for the taxes and the subsidies. So it's interesting, nothing they could do to get this kid to win. Absolutely nothing. We were winning in the polls, we had professional polls done, and we had found out 2 years prior to him, the election, he was in college, of course, he was just 24. He had written a paper that he was an atheist. Okay, well, I'll tell you one thing, poor people, which I've been poor, are not atheists. We're not, we don't do that. And there are 28 square miles in my district. It's a little district, very compact district, and we have 50 churches.
Wow.
Yeah, they're not electing an atheist. And I made sure every voter knew it. We sent out a flyer to every voter, Democrat and Republican and Independent, who voted in the last 5 years. They knew he was an atheist. And I had people showing up at the polls on election day say, I'm here because of that. Okay, a lot of African Americans in my district. They're not atheists. They're not. So we were winning. Nothing they could do to get this kid to win. We had electioneers at every polling location in my district. At 18 precincts. We had poll watchers at every, and electioneers at every precinct. And the results come in on election night. He has beat me 2-1. There's no way. I know I won that election. There's no doubt in my mind. So what do we do? My gosh, you know, I have a Ph.D. in chemistry and physics, and I worked in the semiconductor industry. I know a little math. And I'm not the person you want to steal an election from with a computer, because I know how they work. Okay, and I've been an engineering manager. So, you know, people, I don't know if I've been in the engineering industry here in the room. We engineers work off of specs, do we not? Work instructions. So you know what? The election code is a spec. Tells the counties what to do with the election. And as candidates, how many here worked on campaigns? Okay, everybody, okay? Yeah, okay. You know, in a campaign, we worry about block walking and phone banking and kissing babies. Do we worry about how the vote's counted? We really don't. We just trust. We trust that system's going to work. Well, little did we know you can't do that. So I'm going to tell you, if you're one of the good guys, and you're going up against the status quo, you can get to the 1-yard line with a good campaign. The only way you're going to get in the end zone is keep your election from being stolen. And that's what we found. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the spec. What does the election law say in Texas about how we back up those records to what the computer said we voted? You ever wonder what happens to your vote when you vote on that little machine? Mom will show you what happens to it. And we're going to look at the law. Okay. Alrighty. So in Collin County, do you use the Hart Intercivic system or the ES&S system for voting? ES&S. Okay. And what I'm going to show you is Travis County uses Hart. And the Hart Intercivic system is used 100 counties across the state and all over the country. But the same things apply because the same laws apply and the same basic model of the software is very similar. So what happens to your vote? You see the ballot on the machine, you see the boxes and all the candidates' names, the date of the election, and you vote. And you all have a touch screen. This one, we use a little wheel and we click through the boxes and you push enter and that's where your vote is cast. But where does it go after the machine? Well, it goes onto what's called a memory card, a mobile ballot box. Mobile because it moves around, okay? So your vote goes on here. Well, what happens to that card? Guess what? All those cards go to one place, one main computer at the county. Imagine if you're Houston, Harris County. You've got 1,000 precincts. If you want to steal an election, do you want to worry about all those election judges? 2,000, 3,000 election judges, 2,000 cards? No, it's too much work. You want to be at that main computer. All the cards come to you. Isn't that the easy way to do it? I'm an engineer. That's how I would design it. And that's what's happening. These cards are going to one place, and that's the vulnerability of these systems. And we'll get to that. Let's talk about the law first. Okay. Texas has some of the best election laws in the country. It is fabulous what we have. This Chapter 52 is the best. It lists that the vote in an election is by official ballot. That's the first principle. Guys who like science in here and engineering, the first principle. The vote in an election in Texas is by official ballot. It's not just any old piece of paper. Okay? And the state actually defines what a ballot is. So let's go through what that is. First of all, you have to have a serial number on the ballot. You have to have a tracking number to trace for traceability for the ballots because you can't vote on any old piece of paper. It's in the state constitution that you have to have sequential numbering, and it's also in the election code. Okay? And you have these on your one-pagers. All this stuff is listed on here. You have to have the name and date of the election on the ballot. Who knew? Pretty simple, right? Who knew? You have to have voting squares. That's actually required in the code to the left of all the candidates' names. That's part of what makes it an official ballot. And you have to have voting instructions. So I knew my results were wrong. You know, there was just a mistake that happened. This is easy. Let's fix it. Let's do a recount. So in Texas, you can do a recount in multiple ways. Paper ballots, which were our mail-in ballots in Travis County, we're going to manually count those. So that's what we wanted. But also the electronic votes. Did you know there's 2 ways to count electronic votes in a recount? You can just run it through the same old program. Spare me. That doesn't work. I know that. Or you can do what's called a manual recount of ballot images. What's a ballot? Serial number, boxes, all the candidates' names, serial number, date of the election. That's a ballot. So we expected to see ballot images in that recount. So what happened was we counted the mail-in ballots, and you can see there's a serial number, boxes, the name of the election and the date, and all the candidates' names. Check, check, check. That's a real ballot. Meets the criteria of the state law. And you know what? Those mail-in ballots, the paper ballots, were tied exactly 50-50. Tied exactly 50% to 50%. 240 to 240. Remember, this is a city council race, small numbers. Exactly tied. Well, it wasn't 2 to 1, those paper ballots. The 2 to 1 came into play with the electronic. And so we'll get to that. Let's talk about the 3 records that have to be retained for an election in Texas. This is a state law, and I love this. You have to have a result computation. You have to add up all those cards, so you got to have a computer to add it up. You have to have a precinct return that has to be signed, returned, and retained by the county. How many here have been election judges? Okay, you know about the tapes. Clerks too, y'all know. You have to have a precinct return. Travis County told their judges not to print the tape. Wow. And I'll show you that. Seriously. No kidding. He said it's illegal. I'm like, yeah. It's illegal because the Texas Code says you got to do it. You have to have a precinct return. Chapter 66, Chapter 66, and Chapter 65 say you have to sign them. And judges, if you don't return them, it's a misdemeanor. Wow. You're not playing Monopoly when you're an election judge. It's big business, okay? It's real business. The third thing that has to be retained is called a ballot image. And this is something candidates across the state have known for the last 13 years counties cannot produce. It's called a ballot image. Has to be stored. The Election Code, Chapter 128, I'm going to show you that. Images of ballots cast are used in a recount. Chapter 213. And then the ballot image certification requirements of the Texas Secretary of State's office in Texas Administrative Code says you have to have a ballot image system for a recount. Okay, we'll get to that. I'm going to just jump to the end of the movie. No electronic voting system in the state can keep a ballot image. None, zero. Candidates have known this for 13 years and nobody knew what to do about it. All right, let's talk about the tapes. This is one of the records that have to be there to prove what the computer said we voted. Original precinct returns have to be in envelope number 1, number 3, has to be signed, and this is what they look like. It's a thermal tape with all the candidates' names and the number of votes they got, and you have to return those to the county. This is what a tape looks like for people who haven't been worked elections. What you have is a tape. It's called a precinct report, and you'll see every candidate's name and the number of votes they got. This was one precinct back in Travis County when Dewhurst and Cruz were running for U.S. Senate. You see each candidate's name and the number of votes. That's a tape, results tape that's required by law. Also, the Texas Secretary of State's handbook, this is the handbook for 2016, it goes through here and it talks about what you have to have for a direct recording electronic voting system. It says contents of envelope 1, printout of the tape, Chapter 66 of the Election Code, envelope 2, printout of the tape, Chapter 66 of the Election Code, envelope 3, Chapter 66, printout of the tape. No one disagrees that you're supposed to print it out. Travis County told their judges not to print it. This is an envelope we got in our lawsuit. And number 7, to the judges, judges' booth report from the judges, do not print the tally. They told them not to print it. So whoops, one of the records are missing. We don't even have it in our election. So election judges, what do you think of that? Yeah, bad news, bad news. Okay, so that's the first election record that's missing in our election because I didn't believe the results. But what you're supposed to do is, the reason you print the tape, just in case the problem happens with the equipment, after it leaves the polling place. You print it at the polling place, the judges sign it, and you turn it in, and it's a record in case something happens to all that electronic equipment. Well, in our case, we don't have it. Okay, so why do we not have it? The Texas Secretary of State is giving waivers to law to counties across the state. Yes, sir. This is a letter that we got for our election in 2014. And it says here, it's a lot of words, but don't worry about printing the tape. Print the access code report instead. And the access code report is just the number of people who voted. It doesn't say how it was divvied up. The results tape shows how the votes were divvied. And that's what you're supposed to retain and sign and give back to the county. Notice here that the Secretary of State's office says, well, ballot images remain on the machines themselves for recounts. Okay, well they don't. All right. So we asked Dana Debevois, who is our county clerk, why she told the judges not to print the tape. Because it was the law. She said, well, that's not the final law. We said, well, what is the final law? This is on the witness stand. My lawyer's really good. He's awesome. And he says, what's the final law? And she says, there's additional instruction directives from the Secretary of State's office that says we don't follow that law, we do something else. Ooh, really? He's real good, so he asks her again. Do you think the Secretary of State can tell you not to follow law? I know they can.
Oh, man.
That's news, big news, guys. That the Secretary of State can tell county clerks across the state not to follow law. And we got it in our lawsuit. When we went to this recount, we asked for the ballot images. And so I went to the code about what ballot images are. So this is chapter 128 of the computerized voting system code in the election code. And it says, this came into play in 1997 when electronic voting was about to hit the scene in Texas. 1997, and it hasn't been amended since. You have to have a main computer to coordinate ballot presentation. You got to see the ballot when you vote, and we see it. Vote selection, that's a little wheel or the touch screen. Ballot image storage. Well, what's a ballot? Serial number, boxes, names of everybody who's running. Date of the election, a serial number, right? That's what a ballot is defined by law. And what's an image? A picture. That's right. Ballot image storage. And then result tabulation. You have to add up all those cards. Okay? Also in the recount code, it talks about printing of images of ballots cast for the recount. And all through the code, you talk about ballots. You got to count ballots at the recount. And we're allowed to be present there. I was allowed to be present when the printing of the images. So I went to Travis County and said, I want the images printed. And they said, well, Dr. Pressley, we can't give you ballot images. We can give you something else. It's called a cast vote record. And I'm going to show you what that is. They printed 4,000 pages of something that looked like this. And here's it blown up. Do you see a serial number on that piece of paper? You even see a date, December 16, 2014 on that piece of paper. I was in the election, my name's not on it. There's no boxes. This basically is a printout, one per page of what the computer said we voted. Those in here who understand computer science, this is printed from a data structure, which is like an Excel spreadsheet, kind of one comma delimited file. And they printed one per page of what the computer said we voted. A recount is intended to count the original vote, not a data structure that's 4 steps down the road at the county. That's not a recount, okay? So I looked at this and I said, stop the presses, this is not a legal ballot. And they're like, no, 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 this is, so the Secretary of State says, this is a ballot image. And I would say, no, no, it's not. It doesn't have the boxes, it doesn't have a serial number, and actually the Constitution says it has to have a serial number. So we filed a lawsuit. Again, this is the first lawsuit in the state of Texas saying that tapes are not printed and ballot images don't remain. And actually, nobody, Collin County, can't produce a ballot image. Guys on your equipment. Can't do it. No county in the state can do it. Okay. And that's big news, I think. Alrighty, so no unique serial number, no date of the election, no name of the election. This is not a ballot, it's not an image of a ballot, it's not even an image file. It is a data structure file, which is a very small 32 bytes file. When image files are, there are thousands of bytes. We know what images are, we get them with our grandkids, right? We know what images are. This is not it. Okay. And again, remember the Secretary of State said, oh, don't worry, don't print the tapes, it's okay. Because ballot images are on the tool, on the equipment. Well, they're not. Secretary of State, Mr. Keith Ingram. And no candidate's ever challenged this before. And we said we're going to do it. Even Travis County's own website says that the e-slate machine captures an image of each ballot cast for manual recounts. It can't do it, according to the county. So I have 4 U.S. patents, so I know how to read them. So I looked up the HART patents. And guess what? The HART patents say it can do it. They promised the state of Texas they could do it, because it's the law. Okay? One of the patents said an exact copy of the cast ballot image is moved to the memory. It says it can do it. Even the certification system in the Secretary of State's office, Elections Division, this is the administrative code, tells the Secretary of State what their job is. It says electronic ballot image systems, you have to have it for recounts. Printing of electronic ballot images. And I know the Secretary of State knows what a legal ballot is. I'm sure of it. It's their job. So where are they? Where are the ballot images? Are they on the equipment? And maybe if we had them, the election wouldn't be 2-1. Okay? So that was the question we had. Alrighty, so no ballot image, no tape. So all we have is what the computer said we voted. So what we thought was, there's something wrong with that, the main computer. So we started doing some analysis. So we've talked about law and how Travis County is violating state law and other counties are violating state law. The question now is, what happened? How did it happen? So we started looking at a lot of data. So I had people who've worked on campaigns, you know, early voting, we get early voting lists of voters, and we take them off our list, right? So you don't want to mess with them, don't block them or phone bank them, you know, leave them alone, they've already voted. So as a candidate, I had those lists of people who had early voted. Every 24 hours we get that list. So what I did, I kind of did an accounting audit of the canvassed early voting results by precinct to how many people had voted. And actually, there's 18 precincts in my district. We had the number of ballots that were cast in each precinct and the number of voters from those voter lists that the county gave us. And we found there were more ballots than voters' names in almost every precinct.
Wow.
And I know math, and that doesn't work. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 precincts. It's absolutely almost every one. And I'll tell you what, that is a fingerprint of a hack. Because when you target a percent and you go backwards to the number of voters, you have a little bit of a decimal problem. You have to round up. Yeah. So that's where that comes from. So I was sitting there one night, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was thinking about, well, I'm an engineer, how would I steal an election? Because we're all kind of trained the same way with math and on all that. And so I had a flash, and I said, let me do this. I know the 80-20 rule in engineering. People have heard the 80-20 rule? So the 80-20 rule says focus on the big hitters, 80% of where the issues are. So I looked at the precincts where 80% of my voters had voted, and there was about 9 precincts. And I did something else a little unique, kind of flash, kind of came to me. It said, look at just you and your opponent in the general election. There were 8 candidates in the general, and then he and I went to the runoff. So the other 6 candidates, I just excluded them from the analysis in the general election. And I looked at just my votes that I had been reported and his votes that had been reported. And I looked at just he and I, the sum, and then my ratio to that sum of just he and I. It's a little bit unique way to do it, but it kind of came to me. And then in the runoff on December 16th, it was just he and I got my ratio. And what I saw was shocking. 3 precincts stayed exactly the same percent. And 4,000 voters had traded out for the runoff. Why did the percent stay the same? It didn't make any sense, because that doesn't make sense. And a lot of negative campaigning happened here, okay, in between. And so I had a statistician in the lawsuit say, do this, Laura, that seems unusual that they would stay exactly the same. Looks like it's a target percent. He said, do this, plot on an x-axis what you got in the general, and on the y-axis, plot what you got in the runoff, and see if there's a correlation, and do that for other candidates. There were a lot of candidates in runoffs because it was the first 10 district thing in Austin, so we did that. So I'm going to show you. Same apples to apples. This is District 6, I was District 4. This is one candidate, and the general on the X, his runoff on the Y for 80% of where his voters voted. Okay, this is another candidate, District 7. Another candidate, District 1. And this one's mine. It's a straight line, R squared of 0.98.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, I was an engineer at Motorola and Advanced Micro Devices for 17 years and a manager. And my engineering eye knew what I was looking at. That tells me there was a program, and it was a target.
Yeah.
Each precinct was targeted. The other ones are random. This is what it's supposed to look like, guys. This says there was a program. And the same program they used for the general was what they used for the runoff. Wasn't even very creative. And if they'd been off a couple percent, I might not have caught it. And if they'd not been so greedy at 2 to 1, I might not have caught it. So a little too much, okay? So you know what? This was about 2 in the morning when I saw this. And I got sick at my stomach and I felt like I touched the devil. And I went to bed and I told my husband my election was stolen. And I think I found the program. And we had a choice at that point. Do we step up and take personal responsibility? Or do we step back and be a victim? And we decided to step up. This cannot go on. There's no backup record, and it looks like there was a program at the main computer. We have to do something. Because I tell you what, I've been all over the state for the last 10 months telling this story. And candidates have come up to me and said, my election was stolen too, and this is this. And I'm like, what'd you do about it? You know, people didn't know how to do it because this is complex. It takes somebody with this background to understand what to do. What do you ask for in a lawsuit? What's the data that'll convince a judge? Okay? So this was very difficult to do. Okay, so I'm going to remind you what happens. You vote here, goes onto the card goes down to the county, goes to one computer. So we think there was a program on that main computer targeting the percents at these precincts. And so we, in our discovery, in our lawsuit, we got to ask for the audit logs of that main computer. An audit log is a time date stamp of every activity that happens. And so we asked for that. And so then we got pages and pages and pages of lots of line code or line entries, and we were looking for something. We were looking for anything that said something could have been wrong. Was there any irregularity? Was there any problem? And I'll show you what we found. So we got the audit logs, and 9 times on election night, we found corruption errors of the memory cards that were being loaded. Invalid, corrupt mobile ballot box. 9 times on election night. Do you want to see the word corrupt on your counting computer at the county? That's the last thing you want to see. Oh my gosh. So it looks to me like there was these corrupt cards being put in when the normal mobile ballot boxes were being inserted, and actually corruption before my precincts were being loaded. And that's what we found. It was surprising. Corrupt mobile ballot box. This is kind of an eye chart. There were many pages of this thing, and these is kind of the groupings of the corruption. It started at about noon, and then all the way through till about 10 o'clock at night, the corruption errors occurred.
Is it only your election?
These corrupt memory cards, this is one audit log for the whole election. So everything's all mixed together. Everything's all mixed. When you put in the cards, they're coming in from all over the precincts.
So you can't tell which one's yours?
Well, let me show you. The corrupt card doesn't have a signifier. The computer didn't recognize it, so it didn't look like it came from the precinct. We think there was a program on that card because the computer did not recognize it. Okay?
Did they count it?
Pardon?
Did they count? What
we can't tell. We don't know. The computer says it wasn't supposed to be there. Okay? So we had a computer expert, a Ph.D. computer scientist, as an expert witness, and he looked at all the audit logs. And honestly, there was a report done in 2007, Stanford University professor and a Rice University professor who audited the Hart Intercivic source code. And this was a hack scenario they had identified 8 years ago.
Wow.
Dr. Jacobson read the report, and this is a quote from the report. This was the old report from 2007 that he had read. An adversary may introduce corrupt mobile ballot boxes into the legitimate flow of mobile ballot boxes from the precincts back to Election Central, and that's the California Secretary of State report, page 48. And this could damage the credibility of the vote counting process. corrupt mobile ballot boxes in the flow of normal ballot boxes from the precincts back at Election Central. Check, check, check. It was a hack scenario identified 8 years ago. So we asked to see the audit log of where the cards were being programmed. Who had access to this card? We also found something that was really surprising. One of the mobile ballot boxes that were corrupt, number 603, was loaded on 11/21 and not logged out until 10 days later. Where was that card for 10 days? Where was that card? Was there really in the computer for 10 days straight and no log out? My computer logs off after 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
This is a security breach at minimum. Okay? Again, and this was during early voting. The mobile ballot box, same one, 603, that was corrupt back on the other pages, loaded on 12/1 and not logged out again until 12/10. Where was it? Who had it? So we asked the judge in our court case, because it was an election contest, we said we want to take the deposition of the person who had this card and who was putting it in 9 times on election night. Is it 9 cards? Is it 1 card? We couldn't tell from the audit logs. And he said, no, you can't take the deposition. And we said, well, can we get to the card and see if there's software on that? What's causing it to be corrupt? What's causing that card not to be registering from a precinct? And he said, no, you can't get the card. And by the way, Dr. Pressley, you don't have any evidence and we're going to throw you out of court. For real. No evidence, summary judgment is what he granted the other side, our opponent. And we respectfully disagree with the judge. We're grateful that he let us get 1 round of discovery, but then he cut us off. And we asked the county, on the e-slate machine that shows you a ballot, it shows you an image of a ballot when you vote. So we know it can save it. It can save an unvoted image because it shows it to me, right? We want the manual to see if the ballot image is on the machine. And the county said, we don't have the manuals. Oh, millions of dollars of equipment and you don't have the manual to that machine. We didn't believe them. And we said, basically, if you had the manual, maybe you could pull up the ballot image. Okay? So we got thrown out of court. We got also sanctioned $40,000 for a frivolous lawsuit. Yes, serious. Hang on, let's do questions at the end. Hold your question. Yes, bless you. And so our opponent, lawyer, approached our lawyer. This was at the bench in the hearing and said they wouldn't pursue the sanctions if we would not appeal. So we're going to appeal. So that's our lawsuit. Okay, well, let's kind of recap here. 3 things have to be there for an election in Texas, electronic vote. You got to have a ballot image. Well, we don't have that. Nobody does. We don't have a precinct return. And now the result tabulation is corrupted. So the bottom line with our case is the only ballots that remain are those paper ballots, those mail-in ballots, and they're tied exactly 50-50. So there's no victor in this election, and we need a new election, possibly with paper ballots since the equipment can't do what it's supposed to do. So that's our lawsuit. Okay. All right, so let's back up and say big picture. How does this affect the state of Texas? Okay, this is a Travis County issue, but what's going on around the state? On election day, there's 2 kinds of voting that occurs in Texas. Precinct level voting and countywide. And I think Colin is countywide. So you can vote anywhere in the county, all right?
That's right.
That's right. And I'll tell you what, let's look at countywide first, because that's a new thing that's happened in the last about 8 years in the state. These are counties that are printing the tapes for countywide, okay, for election day. There are. They're printing tapes. Not printing tapes are these guys. And there's more. These are just the ones I've been to and talked to, okay? Look at that. No ballot image and no tape. Look at that. Precinct voting. These are the ones that are still doing precincts, and they're printing the tapes on election day. The judges are printing it. And you know what? There's some counties that are not even printing tapes for precinct voting. They're not getting a waiver. These guys are getting a waiver from the Secretary of State. Don't worry, don't print it. Okay? That's where we are in the state. Remember, the Secretary of State's own document says to print it by the Election Code, Chapter 66. So there's a lot of violations going on all over Texas. Let's look at early voting. This is an interesting situation. Election judges, do y'all print the tape at early voting? No. Not the results tape. You don't. Yes, you do not print it. Very few counties print the tapes on countywide for early. Most counties do not. So no ballot image, no tape at early. Okay? It's interesting. I'm going to tell you about another waiver that the Secretary of State's giving, and you might see this this consistent problem with the Secretary of State. For the primary in March, you're supposed to do a paper ballot audit of 3 precincts at minimal to prove what even the paper ballot scanner machine, that there's no program on that. Okay? The Secretary of State for the primaries sent an email to county clerks, election administrators, and county chairs that waived this partial manual count audit for 254 counties in the state. Every single county got a waiver not to do this audit. This is a check and balance, and it's gone. So I called Keith Ingram. I was not happy about this. I couldn't believe it, because this just happened in the primaries in March 1st. And I asked Keith, I said, why did you give this waiver to every county in the state to not check those paper ballot machines? Because there's a lot of counties that still do paper ballots, guys. Bell County, Gillespie County, there's a lot of counties that still do paper. They've held on to it. And he just waived every audit for all those counties across the state. And I said, Keith, why'd you do that? He goes, that's what we do. I said, wait a minute, why would you do every single county in the state to not have this check and balance for these paper ballots? He goes, that's what we do. I'm sorry, that's not a good enough answer. I'm sorry, why? It's not an answer, but he did it. Okay?
Job security.
I don't know. He wouldn't answer the question. Okay, so let's take a 30,000-foot view. Let's look at Collin County, all right? So there's 3 times you can pick to vote. You get to pick, if you're over 65, you can do ballot by mail, you could do early, or you could do election day. And these are electronic, and the paper ballot is ballot by mail. Ballot by mail, the computer tabulates it. Like I said, the scanner scans it, and it can still have a program on it, but you have a paper ballot to go back to. Early voting, the computer tabulates it. Well, there's no ballot image, and there's no tape in early voting. Okay? Election day, computer tabulates, well, there's no image. Maybe there's a tape. So I want you to think about, when is your vote most secure?
Election day.
When is it least secure?
Early voting.
When are we told to vote?
Early and often.
You got it. Early voting, there is no backup record at all. 0. I want you really to consider ever voting early again. Okay, and I'll tell you one thing, I've been all over the state, and I've had candidate after candidate tell me, I won here, and I won here, backup records, right? But I lost early voting, and I lost the election. I'd be curious what your tax thing.
We had 3 reports that, one of our most powerful demographics was the over 50 crowd, right? And we had 3 people report back to us that multiple times that they hit the large text version of the deal. Mm-hmm. It was changing their vote from for or from against to for.
Yeah, but I'm curious about your results. Do you know how you did ballot by mail early in election day?
Well, no.
Look it up. Look it up, because you can't. We need to understand this, guys. I'm going to show you a real life example of this. Is anybody very familiar with the Houston mayor race? Yeah. Okay, Sylvester Turner, strong Democrat, was running against Bill King, strong Republican. And this is how it came out. Mr. King won ballot by mail at 52. He won election day at 52. He lost early voting, and there's no tape and no image. And Sylvester Turner won Harris County because of early voting. There's no backup record. Fort Bend was another piece of data that came in. Fort Bend was countywide. There's no tape and no image. And before Fort Bend was even counted, Sylvester Turner won Harris County. And that's not very common knowledge. Everybody thinks it was Fort Bend. No, he lost Harris to begin with in early. Early voting is a big issue. There's no backup record.
Well, I've been saying for years, it just gives Democrats 2 weeks to cheat.
It gives a lot of people 2 weeks to cheat. It does. It does. So I want you to really consider the big picture here of how this is going on. Okay. All right. So a lot of information, went through it really quickly. And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm here for 2 reasons. One is to educate the grassroots of what's going on and really reconsider the early voting component of this. Okay? The second thing is we're in this big lawsuit and we need support financially. So I'm here for you to consider helping us. If we're speaking to you and you're moved by this and you want fair elections in Texas, well, I'll tell you what, we're really working hard on this, and I'm a good investment, I'll tell you that. So we are looking at this from a judicial standpoint. We did the recount, we did the election contest, we went through discovery, got the data, had the hearing, we're now in the appeals court. I feel really good about the appeals court, okay? Because they're going to go off of law. And the law in Texas says to vote in Texas by official ballot. An official ballot has got a definition, and that's not what they counted at our recount. Okay, hang on, almost there. Okay, so that's the first thing we're doing. Judicial, grassroots. We're educating the public on what the laws in Texas are. We've contacted and you guys are contacting legislatures, we're doing it, and your county elections, you can tell them, I want the tapes printed on early voting. The law says to do it. Okay, you can tell them that. You can say, where's the ballot image? You can call your county office tomorrow and say, where's the ballot image? It better have a serial number, better have some boxes on it. Is that what happens in Collin County? And then so you can poll watch at the main computer. And we had poll watchers at the main computer in probably 18 counties this last primary. And Dallas was the worst. Dallas was bad. We had corruption errors in other counties than Travis, guys. It's going on all over. Okay? So this is what we can personally do, what clubs can do. All right? Next, legislative.
You go in and ask for this stuff? You don't have to file a public information request, or you just go in and ask for it? They have to give it to you?
You asked them, did
Especially
you?
the logs?
Yes. Where's the tapes? Yeah.
No, but the logs, computer logs.
I think you have to have a lawsuit to do that. We were the first candidate in the country that ever got audit logs of the main computer.
Wow.
No one's ever done it. Okay? And you get called a sore loser and everything. They're not kind. The press is not kind at all, okay? Because you're hitting the nerve, right? Okay, so the legislative component. We've got state senators on board, state reps. We've talked to the election committee, and we've been in the lieutenant governor's office telling them what's going on, and they did not know this was happening. True the Vote didn't know this was occurring, guys, with ballot images or the tapes or the corruption errors. Pardon?
It's True the Vote getting in the act.
Well, we've told them these issues. They can't help us because we're a candidate. But they were not aware of these issues, and we've educated them. Okay? So legislatively, who knows Senator Bob Hall?
Yeah.
All right. He's a hero. He came out, we worked with him months and months, and we interviewed all these counties and said, who's keeping the tapes, who's printing the tapes, whatever. We reported it back to him, and he did a press release. He is livid over this issue. Livid. All right? He's an electrical engineer. He knows how software works. He's a smart man, okay? This is a statement from his press release. It came out a month ago, March. He said, it is not possible to truthfully validate any election result or conduct a legally sufficient ballot recount in Texas where electronic voting is being allowed.
Wow.
Pretty big statement, Senator Bob Hall. We've got Senator Don Huffines on board, we've got Senator Van Taylor on board, and we're working on the rest. We've got Bill Zedler, we've got Jonathan Stickland, we've got multiple state reps. They're not happy. They were being told everything's rosy with the countywide voting and the no tapes. They were being told everything's rosy, okay? And I tell you one thing, I have to give the Secretary of State a little bit of credit, because we've told him, you know, I'm in a $180,000 lawsuit. If we just had the tapes, I wouldn't be here. And we thought that would be all it would take for them to change. No, they're digging their heels in, not still printing the tapes.
Not their money.
It's not their money, it's mine. Yeah.
Ours.
It's ours. It's ours. Okay, so that's legislatively, we're educating these guys. The last piece is the executive branch. We're trying to get to Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton. So what we did, I was at the Republican convention. Who was there? Anybody? Oh, I know about y'all. Did y'all vote on the platform? Yeah. Wasn't it great? Okay, yes, I know. So what happened was, we got 3 new election integrity items on the platform that were not there before. And because multiple counties put up changes to this platform, okay? So these are the 3 things we got added. We support, you have to be positive, right? So we support the Secretary of State strictly enforcing printing of tapes for electronic voting for early and election day at the location after the polls close for all counties. Okay? Because it's not happening, is it? The platform, and 90% of the delegates voted for this, and you guys voted for it. The next thing we got, we support all means of protecting the integrity of our elections, including the optional use of paper ballots. People want paper ballots when they go vote, okay? The next thing is a big one. We oppose countywide polling due to heightened potential for fraud. Because in that countywide voting, they're not producing tapes. You can vote anywhere. There's no accountability by precinct. Okay? This is huge. Because I'll tell you what, Keith Ingram has been telling the Elections Committee for the last 8 years, everything's rosy. And you know what? The Republican platform now says it's not. And thank you for all the voters that voted for this when we did it. 90% passed this. So now Greg Abbott has a mandate, and we're going to use this in 2017 legislative agenda. So we're not just complaining. I'm a good investment, guys. I am. And all the counties that are helping us, I've been all over the state for the last 10 months telling this story. And everybody responds the same way you did. They don't like that straight line. They don't like that no images are being kept. They don't like that the tapes aren't printed. That's our checks and balances. If we don't have fair elections in this country, what do we have? We have nothing. Absolutely nothing, guys. This is it. This is why we have men and girls bathrooms, okay? Because no one's listening. They're not accountable. We can't even vote them out when we want to. That's the problem. Yes.